Hi, welcome to Storytime. I have a book here, beautiful pictures in here by Mary Jane Biggin. This is a book by Diane Wolkstein, and it's called Little Mouse's Painting. Can you see the front of that? It's just so pretty. Okay. Little Mouse lived in her own pretty house under the earth. She had a sweet-smelling bed made of pine wood and honeysuckle vines, a small braided rug, and a painting by her grandmother that hung on the wall over her cupboard. Every day, Little Mouse ate her breakfast of berries and nuts, made her bed, and went up the steps to visit her friends. She's the cutest little thing. She's adorable. Bear, Squirrel, and Porcupine were Little Mouse's friends. Some days she picked berry and nuts with Bear. Ho, ho, Bear would shout whenever he found a particularly fine patch of berries. Ah, ah, he would sigh as he happily ate them. Now look, Mouse is up on his visor. See him? See him up there? That's very cool. Some days, Little Mouse was invited to Squirrel's treehouse and had tea and crackers and flowers. Squirrel loved flowers. Sometimes he arranged them carefully in acorn cups, and sometimes he ate them. That's quite a picture. Yeah. Other days, Little Mouse went for long walks with Porcupine. Porcupine never walked in a straight line, but wandered from side to side of the path to the other. She'd often stop to look at something closely and say, "Oh, look at that stone. Just look at that stone." Or, "Look at that cloud. Just look at that cloud." Then Little Mouse would also pause and examine the stone or quietly stare at the cloud. But one evening, even though she liked to see her friends, Little Mouse decided she would do something by herself. She decided she would make a painting. See, there she is with Porcupine. Yeah. The next morning, Little Mouse set up her grandmother's easel near a blueberry bush and began to paint. The sun shone on her. She made long, thin strokes. She made short, thick strokes. She painted all morning, singing as she worked, and only stopped from time to time for a snack of berries. By afternoon, her painting was finished. As she was looking at it, she heard thump, thump, thump. Look at her working so hard on that painting. Neat. It was Bear. Little Mouse hid behind a tree. "Ho, ho," cried Bear. "That's a beautiful painting. A bear must have painted that painting." "No," cried Little Mouse, coming out from behind the tree. "I did." "You?" asked Bear, surprised. "Yes, me." "Well, I like the bear in the middle of the painting. It's not a bear, it's a blueberry bush." "It's a bear. It's a blueberry bush." He's not listening. "Where?" cried Squirrel from his tree. Squirrel looked from Bear to the painting and said, "What bear? What berry? That's a squirrel." "Where? What squirrel?" cried Bear and Little Mouse together. Squirrel pointed to the bottom of the painting. "No," said Little Mouse, shaking her head. "That's a daisy." "A daisy? That's a squirrel. It's a daisy." "Stop!" shouted Bear. "Well, let's go see Porcupine. She's sure to know." I hope Porcupine can straighten this out. Bear thumped along, carrying the easel. Squirrel raced ahead with the paintbrushes, and Little Mouse went the slowest, for she was holding the painting. When they arrived at Porcupine's house, Bear called, "Porcupine, please come out. We have something important to show you." There they are, at Porcupine's house. Yeah. Porcupine came out of her house and saw Bear, Squirrel, and Little Mouse staring at a painting which they had placed under an elm tree. She stared too. Then she said, "Look at the porcupine. Just look at that porcupine." "What porcupine? Where?" cried Squirrel, Bear, and Little Mouse. "There," Porcupine said, pointing to the top of the painting. No, no, the others shouted. That's a bear, that's a squirrel. No, no, Little Mouse cried. But no one paid any attention to her, so she said to the elm, perhaps you would like to know what I think. Yes, good, and then I'll tell you. The sun is at the top, the blueberry bush is in the middle, and the daisy with the leaf is at the bottom. I know. How do I know? I know because I painted it. Oh, goodness, poor Little Mouse. Well, now, said Porcupine, I think I'll take a closer look. Porcupine went up very close to the painting. Look, she cried. Squirrel went up very close to the painting. A flower and a leaf. How yummy, he said. Then Bear went up to the painting. Ho, ho, he shouted. A blueberry bush. I see the blueberry bush. From close up, I can see the blueberry bush. And I can see the sun's rays, cried Porcupine. Do you know, I think the blueberry bush looks a lot like you, Bear. Sighed Bear, quite pleased. It's a beautiful painting, said Squirrel. Leave it here for us to look at, said Porcupine. They're all looking at the painting. Little Mouse left her painting on the easel all day, but when the stars came out, she rolled it up and picked up her grandmother's easel and carried the painting and the easel and the paintbrushes to her house. There she goes. It's dark. Yep. Little Mouse hung the painting on the wall opposite her bed. She sat in her bed and looked at the painting. She walked around her room and looked at it from many different places. She sat on her rug. She jumped up onto her cupboard. She sat on her bed again. Then she said, Bear is right. When I sit on my bed far from the painting, the blueberry bush looks like a bear. But when I am very close to the painting, the blueberry bush looks like a blueberry bush. Little Mouse ate her supper of berries and nuts. She drank a glass of water and tucked herself into bed. From her bed, she looked at her painting of bear, squirrel, and porcupine. Then she closed her eyes, smiled happily, and said, Good night, squirrel. Good night, porcupine. Good night, bear. Good night, my friends. I'm glad you're all in my painting. And Little Mouse fell asleep. Soon she began to dream, and in her dream she saw clouds, trees, and stones, all of which looked like a little like bear, squirrel, porcupine, and Little Mouse. I really like that story. I hope you did too.